Welcome back for another episode of Strive for 25. Joel Farrell here, and looking forward to share with you our guest today.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Strive for 25. Joel Farrell here, your host, and I've got an amazing guest, somebody that I know for a long time, Miguel Torrez. And you've got, a whole backstory with you. And the purpose of this podcast is, hey, we have so many people that are doing things on the side, building businesses on the side, doing something that they're passionate about on the side, trying to get ahead. And this is a person that's, found their passion in doing things in the podcast world as well. So, Miguel, thanks again for jumping on with us. And do you want to just give a little bit of background of, where you are and what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joel. It's good to see you too, man.
I know.
I'm glad you're doing this podcast, man. It's cool. It's very cool. Thanks for inviting me, man. I appreciate it. So let me go back to this first, man. We met, I think it was like around early 2012. Yeah, around there, right?
Yeah, I think it was 2012. Yeah.
And it was Eric Gandy, a guy who I was working for in DC, who recommended you to me because we were looking. So this is like right after the housing bubble in early 2000s, right?
Yeah. 08, 09. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So everybody's got problems with houses. Most people, not everybody, many people have problems with houses at this time, and everybody's looking to refinance. And Eric was like, call this guy. And I called him, and Teresa and my wife and I talked to you, and we were like, dude, how are you? Where is this? Like, how are you doing this? How are you able to give veterans so much money using a VA loan? Because we couldn't figure it out. Nobody else was doing what you were doing. Mm-hmm. And you were doing it though, man. You were helping the veteran a lot more than any other bank that we could find. In other words, and you know the technical speak better than I do. So if I don't use the right terms, it's no big deal. Just correct me. It's cool.
Yeah.
But you were giving more giving more VA credits that are actually due to the member themselves. And that was really cool, man. That was really cool. So once we talked to you and we got to know you a bit better, and it was like, wow, okay. So we've known you since then, dude. And we've been doing a lot of stuff together. It's been fun.
I know. And what year was it that you guys flew into St. Louis to visit Teresa's parents? Was that 2018, 2019?
I want to say, was it 14? It was 14. 14.
Yeah, I forget. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. No, it wasn't 14. It was 17. It was 17.
Because one of the years we came, Mike and I drove down. We had audience. This is, we don't talk about my day job too much here, but on the mortgage side, we're running a mortgage branch and being in the mortgage world. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and a lot of my, connections and clients are in different parts of the country. And I think this is 2016 when I met you. And
that's when you saw us in person. You actually came and
we drove down. I think you guys were in Virginia Beach.
No, we were in
Wilmington. That's right. Wilmington.
You and Mike were together, and you guys came, and I was like, that is really cool. Joel made a special trip, like drove all these hours just to meet us and have dinner with us and face to face. That was really cool.
I know. That was fun. We started in DC. We stopped a day in Virginia Beach. So we had a client event in PG County at Dave & Buster's, and had a lot of clients and agents come out, and it was really cool because again, talking to somebody through the mortgage process 1,000 miles away, to being able to meet somebody face to face for the first time after their mortgage closing. That was so cool.
Actually, more than one. We did it several times.
You guys, many times.
This all goes into like what we're talking about is like after we met, at the time we met you. So of course I was in the military, and we're moving around. You buy houses, and during that recession, it was in 2007 we had bought a home and we couldn't sell it, so we were renting it. And then in 2010, same thing. We bought it. It was like, so we had two houses, and it was like, okay, Teresa was always more comfortable with real estate than I was, and she's helped me out a lot with that. So it's been good. It's been really good. But we've done a lot of things with you, and that was where it's just kind of like, wow, man. It's like you've been who you say you are, man, and that's been cool. And that's like you do try to help a lot of veterans, man. I dig it. Yeah. A lot of people, period. But
so as we're talking through this, there's some things to probably dig into deeper. The lifestyle of a veteran when you're moving across country, and then the choices that if you've got a family. The choice is, do I rent or do I own? And then as time goes on, if you're in the military for a number of years, you're approaching 20 years, that's going to be a number of stops. And, well, do you buy, do you rent? What do you do? And then fast forward the clock 2 or 3 years, well, what happens then? So I want to dig into that in terms of the mindset, and maybe you can share some ideas and the struggles and the good, the bad, and the indifferent. But I do want to just stop for a second, and if you want to just drop the name of your podcast and tell us what's all about real quick.
Oh, yeah, sure. It's the Conversation Cannabis and Christianity podcast, and it's we talk about we talk to a lot of people. Most of them are not Christian, actually. Most of them are not Christian. Most of them are believe in something else, and we don't argue. We don't argue.
Miguel, I can't see you arguing. So
I can. Just ask my kids. Ask Teresa.
Right.
Ask Teresa or ask my kids. I can argue. But the point of the podcast is not to argue, right? It's just to talk with people, and it's a really cool thing. It's really fun. And okay. So do you want me to keep going with that, or do you want me to jump back?
Yeah, no. Yeah, tell me in the audience more about the podcast and some of the people you're talking to.
Okay. I just published 2 parts with an episode I did with a guy named Ionuț Rus from Transylvania, Romania, and he has a hemp clothing company that is really, really cool. It is really cool, and I get to meet a lot of people. And I've met a lot of people in the military. I mean, I was in the military for 20 years, and I got to travel around much of the world and much of the nation, and I met a lot of people, and it continues. And that part's pretty cool. It's like it continues in a meaningful way that I really enjoy. But so now I know you're talking about the side hustles and all that kind of stuff, man. And you know what, man? It's taken me a long time to get to this place of peace where it's kind of like, okay, if I'm not operating from a place of peace, then it's not operating from a place of peace, right? So
yeah.
So if I'm doing something and everything can have stressors and strains, but it's like, so you don't quit, but it's like, if you're going to step into something, if you're going to go do something, make sure it's something you can do for a while. And
something you're passionate about.
If you want to do it for a while, right? It's like, if you want to do it for a while, and you got to like, passionate about, it's kind of a funny thing. There's a lot of different terms we could put on it. People call it a calling, a passion, or a mission, or just a duty. And I think a lot of those words sometimes depend on what people believe, and they're all good. I'm not picking on any of them. It's funny being on this end of it with you, though, man. I'm used to being on the other end. So I'm kind of like, I got this, man. But so how this thing came about, man, is
I want to hear this.
I started when we moved after we bought our house here in Florida in 2007. We moved from here to DC, and that was where we met Eric Andy, who introduced us to you. And that was also where we had our first son. And we had been we'd been going out to dinner and movies a lot. Like, we weren't into clubbing, we've been doing dinners and movies for a while. And that was just no longer doing it. It was like, we're doing too much in front of a box. And we had tried to have kids before that. Nothing was happening. So we're kind of like wondering, just where it's kind of in this space of waiting, I guess. And Teresa ends up pregnant, and we decide to basically take television out of our daily routine, except for like one evening a weekend, one night a weekend. And that's when I started writing a memoir. Actually, I started doing that earlier a little bit. I'll take that back. I'd started doing that before we left St. Pete. I started the memoir before we left. It was a turbulent time in our life, and a lot of things were going on. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to write this thing. And I started writing, and then when we got to Alexandria, we did the TV thing. And that's when it really went even further, because she was pregnant of course, for 9 months. and then so it's just me and her, and we're in our place. And I'm just writing away and she's doing her thing. And she was never really into television much either. So I was probably more than watching television than she was. So that matters in a relationship, right? When it comes to these things, these details matter, like how you spend your time with your spouse, it really matters, because when these things go away, your spouse is still there with you, and so is your family. So it is important to pay attention to how you spend the time with your family and your spouse, because when those other distractions are gone, you and they are still there.
Right. Yep.
Without the distractions that you had before, and you're different and they're different and everybody's different. So that's when I started writing that memoir, or really got into that memoir. And as I got closer to the second half of my career, which I really didn't even intend to have it be a career, really. It was kind of like, oh, okay, things are going well. Keep going. This is pretty cool. And I was enjoying myself. I was enjoying myself in the military. It was the Coast Guard was really fun, and it was good. I have no complaints. I learned a lot. So just like anything in life, there's going to be hard times and easier times, and there's in between times. But fulfillment, I would say this, because sometimes passion can be, some people can misconstrue passion with anger, right?
Yeah.
That happens a lot in athletics, right? It's kind of like passion. It's kind of, no, you're pretty angry. You want to go hit somebody right now.
Right.
So that's why, I'll go with fulfillment, man. So fulfillment, that was a big thing in my life at that time, at that whole, around 2010 area, because we were looking to hop out of the military and we were going to open up a business, and, everything just fell apart. That's how we ended up in DC. I'm jumping around. I apologize, Joel. I'm jumping around.
No, but this is all part of the back, because the backstory of how you got to the point where you said, I'm going to get there, do the
exactly.
podcast.
And I worked with a lot of great people, met a lot of great people in the organization and outside the organization, within the community, and with other organizations and companies we worked with. And that working with people is always something I've liked doing. It's something, I don't know, it's one of those things that I got, right? Something's a gift. And I'm thankful. And I wanted something, there's something, when you said, it's like your passion and your job line up, that's great. And that's what's kind of cool about doing the podcast, is I get to meet a lot of people whose mission and calling in life, like you can see they have a skill in life, like they've got an ability, and it's like they've lined it up with their vocation, job, career, whatever you want to call it. I just say vocation because it's kind of like, it's a temporary thing. How you use that ability in this space, you could use that same ability in a different space. So it's kind of like, how that happens is up to the person and how they choose and how they decide to make it walk out. But yeah, it was it's been an interesting thing. So I like talking with people, and then the memoir I have not finished. I've got hundreds of pages, and they're all single spaced, and I got a lot to go through is what I'm trying to get at. I got a lot to go through. Yeah. But that was something that I was, and you know what, man, it's funny you asking me this question on this podcast, and now you got me thinking about it, and it's got me stumbling over. I'm kind of like, I got my storyline, I'm enjoying everything. Because there's a lot of memories, right? It's like a lot of stuff goes into that, right? When you decide to write a book, and mine was a memoir, not a fictional book or anything like that. So it's like your own personal life, right? So one thing I wanted to do when I wrote it was not leave out my mistakes. It's like, I've made mistakes, and I kind of really learned that from well, there are a lot of things, but also something in the Bible is kind of like, you know what? All of the mistakes, like everybody's failures, they weren't concealed in the Bible, right? Like all the great heroes of the Old Testament and those characters, their failures were plain for everybody to read about for centuries to come.
Yep.
And that's where it's kind of like, it's a false idea. When I started the memoir, I was like, I can't, how do you write this? It's like, well, you can't make yourself sound like something you're not. So it's like, okay. But that's what makes it your own memoir, right? That's what makes it your own memoir. So anybody writing a memoir, I haven't published yet. I can't give you any advice on that, but if you find it fulfilling and Depends on what your mission is. And that's where it's kind of like, I want to do something that was going to help people, right? Go ahead, Joe. I've been talking for a long time. I feel like I'm rambling here, man.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Would you say that the process of writing over a period of time helped you kind of fine tune where you wanted to go with the idea of a podcast in the future date? That process. And it sounds like what you're saying is that process was important to getting to the point where you launched a podcast or even had an idea about a podcast.
I didn't even have an idea for the podcast. The memoir was the first thing. And then as we had a second child and a third child, the time for all that stuff really fell apart. Not fell apart, just fell away because my hours had to be devoted to other things, Mm-hmm. So, but it was always there and I knew it was there. And then as I started approaching the end of my career, I was kind of like, okay, we need to be ready to stay in or stay out. And it's like, okay, let's hop out. And we hopped out.
What year was that?
It's not like, okay, so put it this way. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
I was saying, what year was that you got out officially?
2021. Okay. February 28th, 2021 was my last day.
Damn.
Yeah. So, and it's like, and so in the military, this, you're familiar with it, and you either get promoted or you don't get promoted. And if you get past a certain point and they don't promote you, then they retire you. And that's what happened to me. So that I'm not ashamed of it. It was perfectly fine because the timing of it was perfect. So to go back to that, the timing of this was very perfect. And I'm very thankful. And this is why I can say I do in the midst of all the confusion of life, it's like, what do you trust? What do you rely on? And I know we got a little bit of, I know we have a time restraint, so I don't want to go off too on any tangents, but that is how I came to do this podcast, man, is that along the way, I've always believed in a higher power, a source of some sort. I was born and raised in a Christian denomination, but did not agree with much of what it had to say. Not all of it, but much of what it had to say. And then things changed. It's kind of, I don't want to take up too much time on all this stuff right now, but I'll say that there came points where it's like, there's points where it's like, okay, what do you do with this? What do you believe with this? Everybody's going to face that, right? And there's going to be many, many times in our life throughout the day, we have those opportunities all throughout the day to make choices. And when you make those choices to step forward into something, you got to have a plan. And you may not have a plan that is like bulletproof, because I don't think there is any bulletproof. Well, there is one bulletproof plan. Yeah, that's Christ's plan. That's Christ's plan. That's bulletproof plan, man. But
just jumping in into the deep end, right? 2 feet in the deep end. Just hey, you know what? I want to do it. Just do it, make it happen, and just start figuring it out.
It was not really like jumping in though, man, because it all happened. Like the timing of it was very gradual, and the timing of it was hard and good at the same time. And that's just kind of like life. It's like you have good things that happen throughout your day, and you have the things that you're just kind of like, but then there's those bigger marks in life where you're kind of like, this is a bigger deal. This has got some medium to long-term impacts, right? And even some of those short-term decisions have that effect as well. And looking at what was going on in the nation and around the world, and studying and looking at stuff and realizing that, okay, good chance my career could end right here. I need to be ready. I need to move out, right? I need to be ready to go either way, right? Mm-hmm. And so we started talking about it. That's really what we had to do. We had to talk about it. We had to say, hey, we need to be ready. We need to be ready for our family. It's like, we got to do this. And we came to the point where we're going to flip roles, and that's a big deal.
Right. Yeah.
So the podcast really came to be, that wasn't there until probably like 2020, really, man. It's like 2020, that idea for the podcast really didn't come around until then. And it was the title of it. And it's just kind of like, huh. And it just happened that way. And, it's kind of hard to put into words right now, because you're the first person to ask me this question.
I'm the first person that's asked you this question.
Well, maybe kind of, so maybe not. Well, maybe I'm telling you in the detail that I'm telling you right now. Maybe you're the first person I'm telling you the detail, because I'm sure somebody else has asked me about that, Joe. You're right. But on a podcast, perhaps, right? Okay. First person on a podcast. Let's put it like that. But yeah, so yeah, man, I do dig it. It's it's a funny
So,
thing. It's like
so for
I'll put it this way, I'm not making any money on it. I'm not making any money on it. So I'm not making any money on it. So I can't say it's like, I can't give you any advice on how to do that and make dollars on that. There's a lot of people who do that, and I'm just not one of them.
Yeah, and I think that's a question that a lot of people have, or misconstrue, I think is the right word. People that have channels on YouTube, people that have podcasts. There are people that are making money, maybe a lot of money, and then as time has gone on, I mean, the ad revenue on YouTube I think it's trickled down to a lot lower numbers. You have to get to a very, very high level on YouTube in terms of views and watch time to monetize it. Podcasts, I'm not well enough versed on it myself to know when that all happens. And that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to be able to show the audience that, hey, these are real world examples of what people are trying to do to be able to live, get ahead and build wealth and do the things they're passionate about. And, you mentioned before meeting a lot of good people and making a lot of good connections. Is there somebody that surprised you or just completely surprised you with their story or advice or value that you interviewed? Somebody coming to mind?
Ooh, actually, all of them, man, really, seriously. And I'm not saying that to be nice. It's like they all have, man, really, because they all have something to say about a lot of stuff, and it is pretty cool. So you asked me to pull something out of one of these, Pat?
Well, yeah, I mean, so if you got cannabis in the title of your podcast, right?
It makes a lot of Christians not want to be on the show. It makes a lot of Christians not want to be on the show, and the word Christianity makes a lot of cannabis people not want to be on the show. Right. But so far, more people who use cannabis are willing to be on the show, willing to be on the podcast than not. So it's funny like that.
But like from a national perspective, each state is going to have their own laws set. I'm in Missouri, and it's not legal officially, it's medicinal use, and it's to vote pretty soon. And more states are coming on board to make it more recreational use. And remind me, Virginia, North Carolina, where do things stand from a state perspective?
I'm in Florida, so
I'm sorry, you're in Florida.
That's all right.
Yeah,
I know. We just came from Virginia. It's all right, man. We did stuff with you in those states too. It's cool. I remember so I know Virginia went. I'm pretty sure Virginia went recreational, and North Carolina has done nothing. I think North Carolina is decriminalized. Okay. And my mom's still in North Carolina, and that's where that one's hard on me because my mother has a lot of health issues, and I think that cannabis would be very helpful to her should she actually decide to use it. And that's a big deal. It's kind of like she'd have to come down here, and that's a big deal for somebody in their 70s, right? It's kind of like those moves. That's what I'm getting at. Those bigger moves, like these moves in life. It's kind of like we're trying to jam a whole lot of information in a small amount of time. So it's like when we make these big moves.
We might have to do a second part. Who knows?
We could do that too.
Yeah.
We so if you well, let's use my mom's situation. It's like sometimes like time never stops, right? Time's always going. It's like if you got a window of opportunity, do you use it or not? Is it and this is where there's windows of opportunity everywhere, but is it your window of opportunity? And how do you know what is your window of opportunity? And this is where, it really comes down to a personal decision on what you're going to do with your time on this life or on this earth with this life.
Are you talking about your mom or you specifically? Sorry.
Both, everything right there. I'm going to tie it back into there. So, right.
Yeah.
So it's like, she can, right now she wants to stay in North Carolina. So my point is that I could see this window of opportunity for her down here in Florida, but I can't make anybody walk into it, right? I can't make anybody step into it, right? So it's kind of like I can't make anybody go through it. So that I use that as a very personal example of like, hey, this stuff, like when it comes to these ways of making passive income, sometimes they're very easy, and some people are really gifted at doing that. Sometimes people are not so gifted, and that's where it's kind of like, research, do some research and find out more about yourself. Find out about yourself and see if you can do this, because like if you not if you can do this, but if you want to do this for a long time or a short time, right? It's kind of like if you're going to build something, you want to build something. It's just depends on what you want to do with it and what value you're bringing. Yeah, I know the term value is always the big term. Is what value what are you bringing? Like what do you have to say? it's like, what do you have to say? Do people want to hear what you have to say? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. They're not. It's not always going to be yes, and it's not always going to be no. It's going to be both. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a matter of whether or not.
And how many episodes are you in? You're in like 40 something, right? 50 something? I forget.
47 on season 2, and I don't remember how many I did in season 1, but we started in March, and they're just doing it by year, keeping it easy, keeping it by the annual.
Keeping it easy. Yeah.
No sense in trying to, how many months did I do? Trying to figure out when do I start the next season. And you're going twice a week, right?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the plan right now, a couple times a week. And this kind of became a reality just because I'm talking to more people every single day about inflation, the cost of living rising, and what are people doing to try to get ahead, and this kind of the great resignation, right? Coming out of COVID, so many more people are doing things online to make income, doing businesses, building businesses on the side, resigning and trying to figure it out. I mean, Amber is somebody that I interviewed, Blaze Candle Company. She was working in the restaurant industry. She got let go. She was kind of selling candles on the side. I think at Etsy. I forgot. I'm blanking on Etsy or whatever on Amazon. And next thing you know, things are rocking and rolling. They're starting to sell more and became a full-time thing.
That's cool.
And it's like more and more people are doing things like that. And unemployment is so low, and so many companies are still looking for employees, and they can't fill roles. And more and more people are doing things on their own. And for me, it's like, okay, if you want to be able to build wealth and get ahead and start putting money away and investing, you got I call this the savings equation. Income minus your expenses equals your savings. It's very simple. And there's so much out there about cutting your expenses in terms of content and budget and budgeting and meal prep and cutting your Starbucks coffee. But that alone is not going to get you to where you want to go. And so, for a lot of the younger generation that are more tech savvy, this millennial and Gen Z, what can you do, online to be able to generate extra income? If you can generate extra income and put that money away, and then at some point invest in something, and time is on your side, and let that money compound, then you're going to be, going in the right direction. And my background is more on the real estate side of things. That's where I've, kind of had my own real estate journey. So I know a lot about that part of it. So I'm just trying to catalog different ideas and give people, inspiration and ideas of real world people that are doing things out there. So that's one of the hot button topics that we talk a lot about on this channel. But at the end of the day, I mean, everybody has their own journey. And so like for you guys, right? I mean, being in the military, it is such a unique journey that most of the regular public just doesn't understand. When you're picking up your family and moving every 3 to 5 years, and in a new city and a new school system, and then not knowing where you're going to be, 5 years down the road, that it's different. So what kind of weight does that have on you guys? Kind of going back to the military life, how does that affect the way you think about things on a day-to-day basis or a long-term basis when that, hey, we may be moving down the road?
The moving part you get used to, and you almost kind of like anticipate it, but now it's kind of like, okay, we're tired of moving. And I know I know civilians who have moved more than we have. So,
sure.
And there's a lot of civilians going through a lot of stuff right now too. So wait, what was the question you had? Say it again, man.
Yeah. So how does that adjust the way that you adjust the way that you do things on a day-to-day basis, short-term, long-term, if you know that you're going to be moving, especially when you're deciding on where you're going to live, do I buy or do I rent? If you already are at a place and you're moving to the next place, how do you decide, how does that all affect things knowing you're going to be moving?
Depends on what you want. Everybody's going to get what they want, right? And if they can't afford what they want, they're going to get the closest thing that they can want that they can afford. And the moving around part, you're in that process. You're in that process, and you've accepted that fact, and you volunteered to be in that process. It didn't really weigh on me the way it does on some people who don't like moving. like I said, Teresa, when it came to owning rental homes, yeah, Teresa was more comfortable with that than I was. So that was something that I had to work with, and we had to work out, and it was good. And she was right, and I was wrong.
Right, of course.
And as far as you get, I don't know, man. I think the biggest thing is just the uniform itself, and like what the identity of that uniform is, and how it is transposed onto a human being and meshes with their identity. That's the biggest thing. That is because that's what the organization and every entity that asks for loyalty wants you to do, and mesh your identity with their brand. So that is the biggest. I think that's the biggest thing that people have to overcome when the uniform comes off, really. But when it comes to the moving around stuff, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I can't. If your stuff's going to get broken every now and then.
You just roll with it. You just roll with it.
That's like I said. You're in that process, so you're going to be doing it. So when you accept that, it's kind of like this stuff comes with it. And if you're not cool with all that stuff happening to you every so many years, then maybe you should choose something else, or else try something else. Because if it's that traumatic and it's that bad for you, then obviously you're either looking to get over something, or you're looking to say this isn't for me. One of the two.
Right.
But it is interesting. The funny thing is, like when you said that, he's like, yeah, you moved all these times, and I was just at a relative's house this summer and telling him how many times we moved, and then he told me how many times they moved in the same span of time, and it was more. And I was like, dang, dude, that is insane. But that's just the way their life went, and it wasn't bad. They're doing well, they're doing nice, but it's still kind of like, wow, people go through all kinds of stuff, and I don't think being in the military makes me more special than a civilian or anything like that. I don't look at it that way. I don't look at it as like, it sometimes is kind of weird when you go to events and they ask everybody who's a veteran or somebody to stand up. It's kind of like, ooh, I'm not ashamed of it, but it's kind of like, it's just a little different thing. It's kind of different. So I think, and I'm not the only person to think that. I know there's a lot of people that think similarly. And it's an interesting thing. So I can't answer that question very cleanly, Joel. I can't.
No,
it's not a clean question to answer, man. It is a very deep thing. When you step out of the military and you're going to go into that process, you're willingly changing yourself. You're volunteering to be indoctrinated so you can operate within that organization, which operates within many other things. So So you once you've done that, you've made that decision, right? And that's where it's kind of like, okay. And it's I could complain about all I want, but I'd just be complaining about what I was going through it. And I was treated well, man. I mean, it wasn't bad. I know the military services they're having a hard time recruiting right now, if I recall correctly. I think they're having a hard time recruiting. And one thing that is unique about the military, and this one thing is and this goes right along with what you're talking about, because it factors into the Strive for 25 that you're talking about. The federal government is really, generally speaking, and I don't know all the ins and outs, but I'd say the last entity to offer some type of pension that is not going to fail you. Yeah. Because if it fails you, that's a big deal. They got a lot of people that they're going to be failing if they fail people's pensions. And that's where it's a different thing. And it's kind of like, I get what you're saying. It's like, I see it too. Of course, I've seen businesses close all over the place. It's like, they can't get employees. People, it's like, I see it all over too. That's a commitment. You're talking about a 2-decade commitment for that pension, right? So it's kind of like, that's a different way of thinking. And this is where it's kind of like 20th century, 21st century. We've both seen that gradual shift from you're going to dedicate this person's going to dedicate their decades and years to this company or this organization. They're going to retire and hopefully not die shortly after they do. Yeah. To, okay, this company, and look at Enron, right? I mean, some of these companies have done horrible things to people. I mean, look at Enron. It's like, wow, all those people needed that pension when they needed it. And that guy screwed all those people. Yeah. That's generational impact in that area, right? And that's crazy. So people want stability, but they also want to have some autonomy. And that's what's funky about this time right now, is that the autonomy with the digital stuff that you're talking about and everything, like the different ways, that's there. Then also talking with people, they also want health benefits. They want medical benefit. They want some things. And it's kind of like, So there's a lot of space for a lot of things. I think a lot of stuff's going to change. Yeah, man. A lot of stuff's going to change. And I think those changes are probably already happening.
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely in some unique times, and not to get into economic stuff, but the rates have been on the rise. The stock market's been on the decline. House values are starting to come down a little bit. And, I'm not here to make any predictions because I have no idea what's going to happen, but there's a lot of headlines out there talking about a lot of dramatic things. And, like it's just a very, very, very interesting to see kind of where things are going to go. Because this time last year, the Federal Reserve was saying, hey, inflation is transitory. It's not going to be here for very long. And, their predictions at this point in time were very, very much wrong. And so it's just interesting. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason that we're here talking about this stuff, right? It's like, okay, well, what can you do in your world that's around you to try to be able to take control and get ahead and, find something that you're really good at, and find something that you can really do and excel and make some extra cash and just take control and try to have more savings and have more flexibility and more options. And then from there, well, what do you do with it? And then, Michael Allen, we had him on last week, and he was talking about the basics of crypto. I'm not saying anybody should invest in crypto, but it is one thing that people are doing, and people are investing in real estate. People are investing in the stock market. People are day trading. And then we had a guy, Javon, an amazing dude, young, I think he's 24. He's working at the San Luis Lambert Airport. And when he gets off of his late shift, he's trading Forex at like 1 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the morning, like trading the foreign exchange currency stuff. Like, there's just so many different examples of people doing interesting things. And that's what I love. Like, honestly, when I met you in 2012 or 2013, I never would have envisioned you doing a podcast. It just never even entered my brain. And here we are talking about, your podcast. And now I have got something that I'm doing too. It's just, there's just so many cool and creative things that people are doing. I just want to hear more stories, people like yourself doing really cool stuff because you love to do it and you found something that you're good at, so that's what this is really all about. But
that's cool, man. That's cool.
Yeah. And then, like, talking about getting out of taking off the uniform, right? I mean, it's going in from one system to, a different system, a different mindset. And you found something that you're doing, and Teresa's gotten further into something that she's doing in the real estate side. And if you want to, but, sharing that change, what is it like, getting into that process, that system of the military, and then getting out? What's that transition like?
It's funky, man. It's funky. Anthony Lloyd. You know Anthony, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So he and I were talking about that, and I did an episode with him. I think September. Yeah, I think it's the beginning of September.
Yeah.
And that's what we were talking about, is like changing the way you think, because you're so used to thinking in a certain way that you can't think that way, because you're no longer that person. You're no longer that person, meaning you're no longer wearing that uniform, doing that thing in that office or wherever that is for those many days a week, months, years. You're just not doing it anymore. So I know it's like, and this is one of the sad things, is that when I've seen people get out of the military or just retire, period. It doesn't even have to be the military, just retire, period, and fall apart, man. It's just sad to see. And I've seen people succeed and I've seen people fall apart. So it's not a sob story. It's just saying that you see it happen, and it does break my heart when you see people like, wow, man, you see them get out and they retire from whatever, military, civilian, whatever, and families fall apart, stuff like that falls apart. That stuff is real, and you have to pay attention to it, because if you don't, you're gonna eventually. And I say that because I'm raising 3 boys, and everybody's gonna learn their own way. And as a parent, it's like, and I know you got kids, Joe.
Yep.
So it's like, I want them to learn. There's some lessons that I would like them to learn with less pain or less difficulty or less whatever, less negativity than I did. And I can't guarantee that, but you want to equip them in those areas and in all areas, right? You want to try to equip them in all areas. And that's what makes parenting crazy. Is that you can't. It's impossible.
Yeah. Chaos, unpredictability.
Yeah.
Yep.
So so where are we going with this? Oh yeah, so talking about getting out of the military, and then
I just, not to stop you, talking about people falling apart.
That's where we were. Yeah, that's right. So
I mean, it's really interesting because I was reading the story. I think it was in India. There's this village and I can't think of the name of it. They're known for the number of super centenarians. I think people living over 110. I forget what the exact numbers, but is it genetics? Is it the genetic coding? Is it something in the water? Like, what is it? And I think they did some more research, and it kind of, I think, relied on, or got to the bottom line. It's part of the community, the togetherness. It's relying on each other, and we're emotional, personal beings, right? Like, we're social beings. That's what humans have evolved to become. And so, it's not in our DNA, so to speak, to be separated or be apart. Now, again, that's no shame on anybody, but from a genetic standpoint, we thrive off of helping and being with each other. And there's serotonin rushes and all the chemicals that happen when we help somebody. You get that rush when you help somebody. And so that community, it's valuable. And for this village, I think it's, part of the reason why they're living to 120 or whatever it is. And so, when you get out of that structure, get out of the accountability, you get out of the community. I mean, like you said, it's a changes the way you think. So that's one of the things that I'm picking up what you're saying. So when you get out, you have less structure, less accountability, and you're getting into something brand new, right? And then who else is around you?
The loss of structure and loss of accountability, that wasn't it.
Okay.
That wasn't it. I mean,
okay.
I can do that myself. I can do that myself.
Sure.
And I think so that wasn't a loss of structure, loss of accountability. It was just changing the way you think, really. It's like the way you spend your day changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know, it's like, and I bring up parenting because parenting is hard, man. I mean, I know some people who make a point to be away from home, right? It's kind of like, I know some people, it's kind of like, wow, that's kind of strange. And I can understand it because it's not easy. It's hard. It's hard parenting, man. It's hard keeping things going, and it's hard doing it with a smile sometimes, right? And this is why I brought Christ in, because if I didn't have him as a foundation, I would have fallen apart probably yesterday or a year ago. I don't know, but my point is, and I say that jokingly, but it is sincere and true. It's kind of like, if you believe that there's more to this life than the material, then you believe that there's something else after this life. And if you believe there's something else after this life, then there's something to this life with meaning and purpose, profound meaning and purpose, right? And I think a lot of people have a sense of a higher power, but are still figuring out whether if it belongs to a denomination or religion or not. And this is where it's kind of fun about the podcast, is that I don't ascribe to denomination. I use the word Christian because a lot of people can relate, but ultimately I say I believe that Jesus is who he says he is and loves me the way he says he loves me. And that is deeply profound. So from that foundation, from that starting point, the harder times and the more difficult times, whatever you want to call them, because they vary in size, right? They all vary in size. Mm-hmm. The sting doesn't last as long, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Sometimes the sting isn't there. Sometimes it's there, but it's not as bad as it was earlier. The last time you went that go around with whatever. And then there's always fear, right? That's what backs everybody up. Fear. And fear is real. It hits. If it wasn't real, people wouldn't be responding to it, reacting to it, whatever. Yeah. So all those things, when it comes to getting out of the military, some people, it's like when you go to the VA, or what is it? They call it TGPS, something like that. You used to call it taps. Taps is like what they play, at a funeral. So it's kind of a morbid. You go on terminal leave, so you can go on taps. So you can go to taps. This is a joke. But so you go to the taps, and one of the people says, like, your first job that you get out of the military is the first job that you get out of the military. That's it. And and a lot of people do. They go to one thing and they're still in that mode. They're still in that mode, like the uniform's on, and they're approaching that position like they're still in that mode. And the company loves it, but it may not be good for that person. It may be horrible for that person because they forced themselves into this track, and it may not be good for their health. It may not be good for their family. It may not be good for a lot of things, but you get used to it because that's the way you've learned to run the game. And people try to replace that you call it a stimulus, whatever you want, that feeling, whatever, that sense of importance. A lot of times it boils down to importance. A lot of times it boils down to importance. And so yeah, when I was saying I've seen too many people fall apart when they come out of the middle, not too many. I say too many people, period. And that's sad. And that's another big reason why I do the podcast, because there's a lot more encouragement out there than there is discouragement. There's the discouragements wants to get into your ears and then into your eyes a lot. Like, you can put a screen up and, like you said, you're looking at the headlines. It's like, okay, yeah, doom and gloom. It looks horrible. Then it's kind of like, well, those headlines are also tainted with dollars because they need advertising and they want to make more money. And then it's kind of like, oh, it's this, then the whole narrative takes on a much stranger picture. But I also know a lot of people who have succeeded out of the military too, and succeeded after retiring and doing like however many years, and succeeded very well. And that's cool. And those are the stories. I'm not trying to say I don't want to hear any sob stories from at all, because everybody's got them. I've got one. I just told you some of it.
Right.
But yeah, man, it's a lot of people going through a lot of stuff. Everybody always is, even before the pandemic, right? Even before the pandemic and before all this inflation, this madness, the world is changing drastically, and it's changing rapidly. And people are confused. And it kind of makes people think about life and death a lot more. And when you're thinking about life and death a lot more, you're thinking about how you're spending your time. And understanding that, I've seen some people are like, I don't sleep. I sleep 2 hours and I just keep working. I'm kind of like, you can't. You're selling a persona that you can't even live up to. That's you know what I mean? It's kind of like, you can't. There's like grind. It's like, people have been doing that since the fall of Eden. People have been grinding since the fall of Eden. And that's why when I hear the grind and that's why it's kind of like, if it's a stressor, is it really good for you? If it's like, and I'm not saying it, no stress, but I'm saying it's like, if you find a thing, it's kind of like, okay, I got to do this. There's a point of desperation. That may not be a good choice to make from a starting point of desperation. So, but if it's a point of purpose and meaning, it's like, hey, this is something that has got a deeper than the surface. I'll just leave it at that. Something that's deeper than the surface. Then you might be onto something. Yeah. And then you take it from there and you see how it goes. And then in the military thing, I dig it. It's I think a lot of people are having trouble trusting the government right now. And that's why I think their recruiting numbers are low. People are having a lot of trouble trusting the government after this pandemic and after all the stuff that come on afterwards, during and afterwards. It's like, it's a sad thing to see, because people are going through a lot of pain, a lot of hurt.
I know. Yeah. You mentioned grinding, and, when you're grinding and this is something that Tim Grover talks about, the trainer for Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. When you're grinding, what do you get? You get dust. You get left, with dust. And he's like, he talks about, you work hard. That's great.
Did he really say that? I would have thought he said the opposite.
Yeah. Well, he talks about, kind of reframing it into a sense of, hey, you got to be forming something. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying, finding that purpose, that's something that's going to give you meaning. And when you're working hard towards something, an ultimate, goal, ultimate deadline, or a higher level purpose, you're forming something. And when you're forming something, you can still be doing the exact same amount of work. It's just going to have a different mental effect than if you're grinding. So, he calls it reframing.
I call it peace. That's why I brought
Peace.
that peace. It's like if
Exactly.
you're coming from
Find
a
that
place
peace.
of peace, and
Find a place
that's
of
why I
peace.
brought that up at the beginning. It's like,
Yep.
if you have peace, then you have peace, and if you don't have peace, you got to figure out why. And if you here's the crazy thing though, a lot of us, myself and like me too, you get used to living without it in areas of your life, and you don't know what peace looks like in that area of your life. You have an idea of what, like a postcard, maybe picture idea of what it might look like, but as far as getting between here and there, you don't know what that looks like. And that's a funky thing. And here the thing is no one will ever be there this side of heaven. And this earth, nobody will ever be there all the way like this side of heaven. And that's why I was, saying it's like without Christ, things were just stressful, more stressful than they should have been.
Yeah.
And with Christ, things still happen. But now that my foundation is understood, accepted, and approved, and loved, and liked, and all that stuff, it does change your mindset. It changes your mind, because that's what metanoia, that's what repent means. Metanoia in Greek is change your mind. It's not say you're sorry. It's change your mind. What they were saying is, instead of thinking that God is waiting to thump you on the head because of the 10 Commandments, because that's what it was for. It was to show you that you being humanity. Humanity is you, okay? Editorial you, not you, not you.
You're pointing the finger. I can.
So, well, I'm doing this. Showing humanity that they can't perform to a standard that is impossible. Then it's like, okay, well, then what are you telling me? I'm telling you that I love you. I know you can't perform to that standard. I know all about you, inside and out. Hearts and minds are going to be laid open. He's the only one that you and Christ are the only ones that know you inside and out, everywhere. And he says, I still love you. And he offers that love to everybody. And there's nothing you can do to earn it. That is starkly different than every other religion and many Christian denominations, because there are many Christian denominations that pull the old covenant into it. And that's where people get screwed up even more, because they think that they're saved by grace, but now they have to attain to these 10 commandments in order to maintain it. Well, if you could maintain it by keeping the 10 commandments, you wouldn't need grace. They don't mix. And that's a starkly different foundation than any other worldview. And Hinduism, Buddhism, those are very much works based. I mean, you got to earn your way in, and if you don't do well enough, you might come back something subhuman, or maybe a human. Right. Oh, this is where the caste system is real. This is where I think a lot of people forget that the caste system is real. That movie, Slumdog Millionaire.
Yeah.
That was pretty close. I think that was pretty close to what India was like, and or is like, rather, I should say. It's hard. That caste system is real. That caste system is real. Now, you can say in the United States we have a caste system. It's just not defined by a religious standard. And I'd say, yeah, you're going to have that in every country too.
Yeah.
Some countries give people more opportunities than others. So man, it's not just the country, it's the whole world. It's like people are hurting everywhere. It's like people are feeling the United States. Imagine there's a lot of people in countries that aren't as developed, or that don't have the resources, opportunities that the United States has, and they're going through similar things too, because the people that are running those countries and the companies that operate in them, they're feeling the pinch also, and it always impacts everybody. So definitely an interesting time to be alive. And then you throw legalization of marijuana into all of this, and we were talking about it a little bit, and it's kind of like that is something that really sets things kind of like, wow, this is really unique time to be alive. I know. Go ahead, man, you got it.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I know. I mean, it's something that, it's just like any topic. People are gonna have different opinions on it, different views: politics, religion, cannabis, alcohol, any other thing, right? There can be many polarizing topics, but yeah, I mean, we exist in this world where so many different sides of the coin, and But coming back to something you said is foundation, right? Something that you believe in, and something that oh, did you freeze on me?
Nope, I'm still here.
Oh, shoot.
I'm just very still. I'm listening. I'm listening.
Damn, he froze on me. Nope. But that foundation thing, finding that, and once you've got that and having that trust and that faith, it's something that is important and keeps with you and helps you propel, to do things in a certain way, right? I mean, have that foundation helps you stay at peace, find peace, get to peace.
It reminds, it reminds me that I have it too, right? It mostly is a reminder. It's like, hey, Christ said, my peace I give to you. Not like the world gives peace, but my peace I give to you. It's like his peace is different than the world's peace. I think we have an idea what peace in the world means. It means, okay, we can agree to like enemies can agree to like this, but still hate each other, right? That's not the kind of peace that he's offering. He's like, no, this is peace that the world doesn't really understand. And I'm not trying to sign a hyper spiritual, hyper Christian at all, because I have 3 kids and I'm married, and my peace I lose daily. It happens to everybody. And that's the cool thing about it, is that Christ says, I know all that. And you know what? Somebody could be on their deathbed they could be one of those super centurions on their deathbed, even though they're that old. And he says, you know what? Do you accept my love? And they say, yes. Saved.
Yep.
Loved, saved by love. And that's the difference. That's the stark difference between a lot of denominations in Christianity, is that a lot of them say, now that you're a Christian, now you better start performing. And they have a map for performance. And that's scary, because everybody's life is different. Everybody's different. Everybody walks this stuff out differently. So stark difference, man. It's a very stark difference. And once I really understood that difference, because I didn't growing up, like I told you, I grew up in a Christian denomination. That was not how I was taught. I got the, you're saved by grace, but then it's kind of like, but here's the book of rules. Yeah. And that book of rules was big. It was a big book.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, I can't do it. Well, I keep trying. It's kind of like, why?
As we're talking about this, I can't help but think of this little video of Mike Tyson. This goes into the whole peace thing. Someone was interviewing him about him, making like $25 million on a fight, and having all this money. Did you have peace? He's like, no. The time that I had the most peace is when I spent 3 years in jail. And I didn't get deep enough into the video for him to explain why, but he didn't have all the outside influence, didn't have all the outside bullshit coming at him and distractions and people tempting him with all the other stuff to do. And he found some inner peace, being in jail and finding your peace, purpose, foundation. I mean, it's going to be different for everybody.
It is,
but it's just
different.
It's just interesting to talk about and that kind of depth, because it is important, right? I mean, we have all this chaos going on around us, and having a foundation and an anchor to kind of keep pushing us forward in the right direction. It's important.
We put our trust in a lot of things every day, a lot of things that can break very easily, and they're material or they're digital,
right?
But we put a lot of trust in them, and we put a trust in them. Almost, it's kind of like, oh, we put trust in this thing, and then if we say we believe in a higher power or Jesus or anything, I'm not just going to say not just a Christian, but anybody. It's kind of like, how much are you trusting it? Do you trust it for the small things too? Do you trust it for the big things? And I'm not talking about living like a life of inactivity or a sloppy life. I'm just saying trust. Like, do you believe that this person, this entity that says they love you, do you trust them? Do you trust him to thump you on the head when you mess up? Because that's what Christ said is not going to do. He's not going to, I can't wait to hit you, man. You've been waiting. I saw it coming. Bang, bang. I got you. That's not it. And that's the amazing part. But that's what gets screwed up, is that sometimes people think they have to be perfect. And nobody is.
That's not reality. It's not reality.
Yeah. And loving one another, forgiving others, forgiving ourselves. I think a lot of people forget to forgive themselves. A lot of people forget to forgive others, and they forget to forgive themselves.
Yep.
Forgive. And I know we're coming close. I know you said we had a time frame, man. So I'm looking at the clock too. What you want to do, Joel?
Yeah. So cannabis and Christianity. Am I saying that right?
The Conversation Cannabis and Christianity podcast.
Okay. So that's airing how often?
You know what? I did 2 this week, but that's because we had a time constraint. So the first one's an hour, and the second one's an hour and a half, and he's in Romania. So I'm going about once a week. Every now and then I go twice a week. You got me curious. You're doing twice a week now. And I'm wondering, I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I should.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing. I don't know. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just going to go do.
we'll see what happens. You got me curious, man.
And we'll see what happens. I'm no expert. You've been doing this for now almost 2 years, whatever.
Yeah, about a year and a half.
Yeah. What do you, when you mentioned something earlier about, time frame, do you plan on doing a long-term, short-term, and not necessarily podcast, but just anything in general, right? What are some of your long-term visions or goals or objectives that you're trying to be able to get to as you go on with this thing?
Well, once I'm allowed to advertise, so basically I can't do any advertising on any of these social media platforms because of the word cannabis. So I can't do anything. So all this, and the growth has not been bad. I mean, for not being able to do much in terms of advertising on those platforms hasn't been bad.
So like, that means you can't put like a post on Facebook.
Yeah, I can't do any of that. I can't do any of that stuff. So, and I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people that are in the cannabis they're in the cannabis space or whatever you want to call it, industry. A lot of people say there is no industry, there's an industry, whatever. People that people have the term cannabis in their title or job description, whatever. A lot of them have a hard time with it too, because it's still federally illegal. Okay. And the long-term goal, man, I'm like I said, I am going to publish that memoir. I don't know when, but I am going to publish the memoir. Yeah, I'm going to do that because that's why I wrote it.
Yep.
And so once, things will change. It's like election cycles, things change every election cycle. You know what I mean? You can definitely count on things happening every 2 years. We're coming up on the midterm off season, and then things will change. Who knows? Maybe marijuana will go federal and things will change big time. Once marijuana goes federal, things will change big time because it'll be legal. Everybody's been
a lot will change at that point.
So
many different angles. Yeah.
And there's so many similarities to like, So, I don't want to get digressed. You asked me about medium, long-term. So raising my kids, man, that's my immediate, my
and your oldest is now 12. How
11, 10 and 7.
11, 10 and 7. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, man, that's my short, medium and long-term mission right there. My kids, my family, my wife, my family. That's the first one.
Damn right. From a podcast standpoint, if you could say, hey, you know what, this is the type of person that I would love to be able to bring on or connect with. Is there a name? Is there a type of person? If we know somebody, who would that person be that you want to be able to bring on the show down the road?
I don't really have one. I don't have that. I don't really have that action, man. I don't.
Well, somebody in the cannabis space, somebody that's blending both cannabis and Christianity, like somebody that's operating a distillery. I mean, like who are you bringing on?
What kind of people am I bringing on?
Yeah, who would be the next person? If I know somebody or an audience member knows somebody, says, you know what, this is the person that should come on Miguel's show. Who would that be?
Any of those? Okay. I'll tell you. Here's how you can do it, man. Here's how you can discern that, man. Somebody who isn't afraid to talk about what they believe on a recording, because that's it. Really, it's kind of like if you can talk about that and what you believe, and it's kind of like, okay, well, you can certainly talk about what you do. You can talk about things you've been through. If you can talk about, but a lot of people are still trying to figure out what they believe, and that was me for a long time too. And I'm not faulting anybody. I'm saying that was me for a long time too, trying to figure out, what do I believe? I know something's out there. I know that there's just too much glaring me in the face to say that this is all there is. This material is all there is. That television, the commercials, that stuff's it. That's not it. And that's kind of like, but I'm not going to get mad at somebody if they think it is, right? That's the point. It's like on the podcast, we don't argue with anybody. But that kind of trust and confidence in what they're seeking. That kind of person.
Cool.
That makes sense?
It does.
All right.
Right. Cool.
Right
Well,
on, man.
we're gonna have to have you on some point down the road in the future, and we'll see where this thing goes. I don't know. We're just gonna keep going and doing, and we'll obviously catch up soon. But I'm just so happy to have Miguel Torrez on here with Conversation, Cannabis, and Christianity, and
Podcast.
Boom, boom. So y'all have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and Miguel, thanks again. And we'll talk soon.
Right on, man.
All right, see you, man.